Welcome to this special session on possibilities for AI in what we call as software test lifecycle. So I hope you're able to see the screen, all of you.
Yes.
Okay. So my goal is going to be a little bit of a kind of a possibility of using AI or a constituent of AI known as machine learning, specifically in the context of different testing activities. And I will take a step-by-step approach, whereas what I'm going to present here may be probably mainstream, I would say 5 years from today, but today there are a lot of pilots on and possibilities exist. So what I'm going to paint is a future with AI for testers and treat AI as a companion, don't treat AI as an enemy. So with that, let me start off with the first onion peeling of what it means to deliver an AI application. Coming back to the basics of AI, it's all about the science, art, technology of emulating human beings. That's where we are. Whereas what we talk about when we see AI systems today, it is kind of emulating some facets of human beings' facilities. Say, for example, when we talk about developing a system like Alexa or Siri, which is a speech engine, it looks at emulating the hearing and speaking capabilities of human beings. Whereas when we speak of developing a driverless car, it looks at emulating the human eye from a perspective of being able to see what is around. So what we need to understand is that we are not necessarily developing the entire end-to-end gamut of applications of what human beings are capable of, but we actually are able to emulate one facet at a time, or a couple of facets at a time. So actually today the success story of AI is in the Alexa or a driverless car or in a chest X-ray diagnostic engine with an AI. But all of these are primarily related to developing one small application using a small facet of human capability. But it's not like it's able to emulate the entire human being. And that particular facet, which is very important from today's perspective, is what is known as machine learning. Machine learning is that critical subset of AI which is the most successful. So a clear point I want to mention is AI is a broader science. It's a huge range of capabilities. Whereas the one specific aspect of AI which is very powerful and has given very successful systems today for us, whether it is in spam filtering or whether it's driverless cars, whether it is cancer detection, or whether it is about playing champion programs like IBM Watson, all of them use this technology called machine learning. Machine learning is strictly a subset of AI. The whole purpose of machine learning is you generate patterns from input data. And the way you do it is you automatically extract from data without any programming. That's the main goal. See, a lot of times we get into, when we talk about programming and testing, you think of a program as an if then else clause, some function which takes care of corner case, then comes and sees exception, then go into then else, then if then else, all that. But in that, you see, what you got to understand is we are used to thinking of software over the last centuries as logic to be defined by us, which is going to help the machine traverse the path which we tell it to. Similarly, from testing perspective, we test based on the logic that is there in the program, and we try to give it data which flows according to the logic, and we test the flows. But unfortunately, in AI, we have to just unlearn all that AI is purely based on automatic extraction of patterns from data with no, absolutely zero logic from programmer. Scary, isn't it? So that's what is machine learning. Machine learning is all about patterns which are present in data, which are extracted by all these ML algorithms. So there is nothing in the control of the programmer or the tester in terms of the flow or the logic, nothing. It's all there in the data. So that's a big unlearning we want to take every one of you through, in that when we're talking about an AI ML, we do not talk about writing the logic related to the flow of a problem, but instead give it tons of data and let the ML program extract the pattern from the data. That's the main goal. So given that notion of testing, notion of quality process, notion of verification, validation, notion of programming, all that changes. And why we're talking about machine learning has suddenly become so important for AI today, because we see tons of data getting generated. We see data available for everyone and anybody to analyze. Then availability of large computation platforms which make the pattern extraction simpler. And more than that, the compute is available in much cheaper cost per unit. So this is the reason why we're talking about machine learning as a significant component of AI, which is affecting every one of us. But keep in mind, machine learning is data in, program out. Means you give data to it, you extract the pattern or the program which is hidden inside the data. Whereas in conventional programming, you give a program and then you test it by passing it input and test with the test whether it is giving a proper output. So testing changes in this notion of AI ML, but that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how machine learning as a technology, which is about extracting of patterns from data, is going to help us in our testing life cycle. So before we go there, let me give a brief perspective of, while there are lots of thoughts about what machine learning can be, what cannot be, primarily there are three kinds of machine learning, because this is very important for us to look at. When we look at data and compare it to what kind of pattern you want to extract, you have to map it to what kind of machine learning problem you're talking about. So machine learning at the base is broadly three types. The simplest of the type is what is called a supervised machine learning, which is based on the idea that there is a whole bunch of input data elements, and then there is corresponding output data elements. Output data is like, for example, if you are trying to generate a pattern from, say, a lot of cancer X-rays, and you want to detect whether the X-ray has cancer in terms of a malignant tumor or it's a benign tumor. So the output will be, is it a benign tumor or a malignant tumor? So that is a crucial machine learning task called classification, because number of outputs are very small, could be 2, sometimes 3. For example, if you're recognizing human written characters, let's say digits, it will be only possible to have 10 classes, 0 to 9. So these are called classification supervised learning. Whereas if you talk about predicting something which is a continuous value, like for example, you want to predict potentially the, what we call as the fuel efficiency of a car based on different parameters, like what the weight of the engine, what age of the engine, how much time it runs in a year annually, and what kind of horsepower of the engine is it, and all that. And you have collected this data from many cars. Then you want to create something which is going to predict the fuel efficiency in terms of how many kilometers per liter it gives. It then is used for a new car or a different car where you collected all this data. You want to predict what will its fuel efficiency be. There it's called as a regression. So most common examples of machine learning applications fall into this category, where there is a set of input-output combinations. Output could be a very fixed number of values, which is called classification, or output could be very continuous, or what we call as a whole range of values is possible, like a numeric value, that is called as regression. And the second category of machine learning is unsupervised techniques. This is important from the perspective of understanding the data patterns without any output variable. That means you only have something called as a data. There is no output variable. There's only input data. You collect patterns within the data. So these are things like when you want to create some idea of what is the pattern in this data. I don't know of any output, but this is the input data out of which I'm collecting data. So for example, some of the very common things which you may be very commonly encountering is, can you form groups of similar people from this collection of people? So that's called as clustering, where you segment people based on similarity of data. So each cluster is a group of very similar data points. This has nothing to do with output class. You're just taking the raw data and creating groups of similar data. For example, you have a bunch of test data, but out of the test data, you see that there are a lot of test data related to, say, testing the GUI. Then there is a lot of tests related to, say, the API. Then let's say there's a lot of tests related to the functional flows. Then there are a lot of tests related to, say, the data of the functions. Then we may say there are these 4 clusters of data available in our collection. We're not explicitly talking about any output, but taking the patterns within the input data. Another popular example, which we are very commonly used in our e-commerce sites, all of you must have shopped on Amazon, right? You must have been recommended. People who bought this book also bought this. Do you want to add this to your shopping cart? How does it work? It works by something called as association rule mining. What it does is it simply takes the collection of items bought together by somebody when he goes to a shopping mart and puts them as one data. Similarly, collect multiple shopping carts and sees which are the items which are bought together. So if you bought one of the book, then if the other book is very frequently bought along with that, you will be recommending that. So for example, if you suppose bought a handbag, you will be recommended a, probably a corresponding wallet along to go with that. So that's because a lot of people in the past have bought them together. So this is basically from raw data of transactions, you're trying to create an association between items, and that gives more bang for the buck for e-commerce companies and shopping companies, because they can fill your cart with more items based on your likings rather than you having to explicitly go around and look at. It is so popular that it is probably a feature without which any e-commerce site cannot function. So any e-commerce site, you will see always this prompt recommendation that based on what you have purchased, they will recommend some items. So this is another level of complexity in the data pattern analysis where you don't have output but only input. A lot of example patterns have come in testing area also. For example, if you want to create a kind of impact analysis and you want to find out which are the programs which need to be, examined in response to a specific, bug fix or some regression to be done. So it is possible that the programs which have been touched together in one release are candidates for a market basket analysis or association rule mining. So that's a classic example of how we can think about applying the concept of association rule mining in context of a typical what we call as impact analysis. Last but not the least, but also the toughest one, is what is known as reinforcement learning. The idea of reinforcement learning is a fairly simple idea. The idea is you don't want to get into a scenario where you have to collect data from history. Instead, you just let the system run from start to finish many number of times. And while doing that, it collects experience. And based on that experience, say you run 1,000 times, you know exactly from that point, say you are going to be better off going north rather than going south, because if you go south, you're going to hit an obstacle, so you may not be able to reach the goal. So you collect accumulatively the knowledge from experience of having gone from input state to the output state thousands of times, and you accumulate the knowledge. So that's called learning from experience. So now when it comes to applying machine learning to software test lifecycle, you have to think from perspective of, if you are given this task of extracting patterns from raw data, whether it is reinforcement learning, whether it is the whole idea of creating patterns within just data as is, like clusters or finding associations, or finding a mapping between input and output, whether it is classification or regression kind of supervised learning, you have to see which kind of learning applies to your problem. But before that, what is most important? You need to have data. You need to have data on which you can run your pattern extraction or machine learning. Without data, there is no machine learning and there is no AI. So a lot of times we get into the buzzword of AI and machine learning, but we stop thinking that we have to put a lot of effort into collecting data, cleaning data, make it available for the right kind of pattern to be extracted for our target purpose. So I will kind of leave it to your imagination as to what kind of data you deal with in testing environments. I've given some examples: source code, metrics related source code like quality metrics, like maybe in an object-oriented CK metrics, or it could be PMD tool output for code quality related, or it could be bug database from history, or test cases, test scenarios, test data, requirements documents which feed into your testing process, or it could be extracted patterns from your test cases or execution sequences like graphs or regular expressions, or it could be just event traces of your test executions. So there could be no limit to what could be the data which could feed into your problem. Now the question is, now the first part you established is you have the data. Now to make it useful for actual applicable areas in software test lifecycle. This is by no means a complete list. It's something where I've seen at least some 1 or 2 use cases where I've seen practically people have used data-driven pattern extraction via machine learning for that particular purpose. Otherwise, I've not put it. But there are many small experiments going on in several areas. For example, there are people talking about identifying clusters of testers in terms of very good testers, somewhat moderate testers. So that is something I've not put here. But some people have tried that kind of a unsupervised clustering techniques to identify, different groups of testers. It's nothing to do with test process itself, but something to do with the people angle of testing. So let's look at all of this. All of these are based on the premise that we have some background testing data available for us to improve our process. When you say improving our process, you need to understand that there is always an element of improvement in terms of efficiency, which is basically reducing end-to-end turnaround time, or it could be in terms of reducing cost by reducing the number of people to do that, by making sure that you have an automation possibility. Or also the other efficiency model is, can we have the same tester do a lot more work as compared to what earlier you were able to do without such kind of possibility? Or it could be also about quality improvement. It's not that we only talking about automation efficiency. We should also talk about, can we bring some kind of quality improvement to all that, or can we bring better predictability? So if you see, all of these have different business goals. Some of them have goals from an automation perspective, some of them have cost reduction, some of them have total headcount reduction, some of them have quality improvement, some of them have just to make things from infeasible to feasible. So I'll give you one example. This comes actually when we're talking about end-to-end test automation. I'll come there. But today, let me give you one category of applications which is going to become the very common applications in a specific domain called networks. 5G networks are going to come our way in the next 3 to 5 years. And believe me, 5G network configurations are so complex that they have at least hundreds of parameters, each parameter taking tens of values. And imagine testing such kind of parameterized networks. It's impossible to do it with humans, or even to develop end-to-end lifecycle process for that. They are talking about AI as the only resort for testing 5G, let me tell you. So there are domains which are getting more and more data intensive, parameter intensive, extremely large data driven process, which are going to resort only to an AI driven process. So without further ado, let's go through one by one. I'll be just skimming through. It's not like I'll go through entire detail of it, because each one can be a huge area by itself. But this is to give you a breadth first view of possibilities, and I would request every one of you to make possible note of this, see where it could be applied in your particular case. Let us look at test case generation or connection to requirements. A lot of times people talk about requirements being captured informally in some Word document or some text. Today, people are working on natural language processing, which is kind of an AI technique for extracting templates, test cases from textual requirements. including extraction of flow related knowledge from textual requirements. Similarly, not only flow, but also understanding the concept being talked about, the nouns, the verbs being talked about in the use cases. So this becomes a very, very useful tool for generating test cases directly from a text-based requirements. Then from a perspective of user execution sessions data, test case execution data, collecting a lot of them, then using machine learning to generate patterns, and you can use that to create test cases. So it is important for us to understand that all of these are basically about some kind of data is there. Based on that, you're trying to create some kind of a pattern out of it. So for example, you have a textual document. Out of that, you're trying to get a pattern which is looking like a text case. Similarly, you look at commonality of the sequence of sessions and trying to create a flow which will be used for generation of test cases. So test case generation is an area which is based on, conventionally a lot of domain specific things. But now with ML and AI, with lots of analysis of input and intelligent analysis of the flows, you can automate the generation of test cases. Then looking at one of the other interesting challenge, which is a big challenge, which is called as test oracle. In fact, AI or ML itself has a problem that it is very difficult to specify test oracle for an ML program itself, because ML by itself is a probabilistic art, probabilistic science. It does not have a notion of exact output which should be mapped to a specific set of data. Pattern could be multiple patterns could be extracted from the same data. There's no concept like there's only one pattern possible for one data. So what you need to look at is how do you create a mechanism whereby you overcome the absence of test oracle. So for example, there is another application where, like AI programs or machine learning programs, graphic design. So it is possible that there is a graphic driver which is rendering the GUI, but it is possible that it's delivering very well on one screen, but on another screen it's not delivering. And in all of this, it's not very easy to specify a test oracle to say that it should exactly look like this. So there we want to use some techniques which are not necessarily dependent upon a presence of a test oracle, which is exact matching of expected test output and what test input we have. So what we need to understand is we have to be very, very clear about, can ML help us in test oracle generation? One of the examples which is very similar to the last point which I mentioned here, which is execution data or session traces. These are very good inputs for us to generate some kind of a model from that, and which can be used as a potential oracle. So test traces or execution traces are very good sources for input to AI programs, which can create some notion of pseudo oracle, but this oracle can improve with time as more and more executions go through and humans give input as to, okay, this did well, this did not go well. So like reinforcement learning we saw, right, where you try to learn from experience, you can keep that notion and try to improve your test oracle as we feed more and more supervised input to the actual model generated from test traces or execution traces. Then coming to the holy grail of today's testing is automation testing. Everybody talks automation testing. But interestingly, today, especially in domains like graphic drivers, domains like AI ML itself, the domain like NLP, domain like speech AI bots, there is a long way to go to create automation, because the reason is, as we said, there is no possibility of creation of proper test oracle in such examples. But that set aside, in conventional test automation also, there is a huge possibilities for using ML and AI driven execution. Example I gave you was 5G. 5G networks are made of thousands of parameters with hundreds of variations. This is impossible to do it manually or even with semi-manual. It has to be done only with a human intelligence aided machine learning based program to test 5G networks. So that's the classic example where you have too many parameters, with too many variations, which leads to real explosion of the space of test case generation. Then from a perspective of analysis of coverage, there's a lot of work happening on ML-based coverage analysis. This helps us in understanding what parts of potential white box programs are not yet tested, or can this coverage analysis improve with more and more automation of execution sequence analysis, like input output data you create, then you create a model of the program behavior expected, and then this can constantly improve by learning from experience or by external input saying that this went right, this did not go right. So this is just tip of the iceberg. Believe me, there are so many areas where this has entered. It could be at multiple levels. It could be automating at GUI level. It could be at automating at API level. It could be automating at simple data as we see in conventional programs. At all levels, we see ML coming to change the notion of test automation. But one thing I want to bring to the table. Today, a lot of times test automation is driven through scripts, which are huge collections of end-to-end sequence of executions. But what ML can do is it can help you automate the automation scripts. Means extracting patterns from your automation scripts and maybe form clusters with unsupervised learning and say that, okay, this is the set of groups of patterns which are following similar sequence. So you can reduce the overall number of scripts because of the common patterns you extract. So think of ML for test automation from perspective where you want to not just do one round of automation, but can you do automating the automation to increase overall efficiency? Then comes the question of test data generation. AI is a huge possibility in terms of exploiting machine learning based algorithms, which can actually generate data. There are very interesting AI techniques in ML, like GANs, which is called generative adversarial networks, which are very good at generating artificial data. It could be used for scenarios where very limited data is available. So in that cases, we actually not necessarily resort to always generating original data, but you can generate artificial data from using such ML techniques. So this kind of generating data could be used for unit tests, or it could be for system tests. This could be for generating not just image, it could be for generating documents, it could be generating functional test cases, it could be generating web-based pages, multiple ways in which you can use GAN-based machine learning projects for generating test data. Then the most common area where AI is very successful, as I said, it is very useful in classifying, say, X-rays for cancer or not cancer. So what's the input there? It's an image. Same way, driverless cars, they look at outputting potentially the speed at which you should drive and direction which you should drive by looking at the outside scenes, outside traffic symbols, outside traffic video. So these are all what we call as, conventional computer vision. And in AI, primary technology machine learning is applied is in the context of computer vision. So when you talk about computer vision, it's all mostly about image. So wherever there is images as part of your life cycle in testing, it could be using AI for GUI based testing. For example, if you want to just, this is one small problem, if you want to detect defective GUI rendering, this could be automated by training the labeled GUI interfaces as defective or non-defective, collect a lot of them and feed it to a supervised classification engine, and then you can create an internal machine learning model which will take this and get a new, delivered rendered GUI and say, is it delivered correctly or not delivered correctly? So a lot of tools have come up which are based on this kind of AI-based GUI testing, which are very good for visual defect flagging. This is examples are Testim and similar, Test.io, AI, etc. These are very common nowadays, especially given that Selenium is very popular for automation. We see that next round of tools will be where we will be exploiting AI-based computer vision technology to automate end-to-end GUI testing. Then this is again slightly related to both testing and long-term maintenance. This is about using the concept of AI/ML for improving quality of programs by automated defect prediction. So here we try to feed data from the code by running some code quality tools like say CK-Metrix or some kind of PMD tools, and take those metrics as inputs, and then output could be whether there's a potential defect in a release or not, and then we can create a AI/ML machine learning based supervised classification problem, because we talk of two outputs only, whether the release is defective or not, and then when you're generating a next release, we can predict before you push it into the repository whether the version you're going to push is potentially leading you to some defect or not, and then plan out on defect remediation before you release it into that by examining the potential for any bug in the current release. So this is a way of prevention rather than reactive approach to testing when actual defect happens or is flagged by, say, an end user. Then from a test prioritization perspective, this is very important, especially if you want to look at conserving your testers or testers' time for using them for important tests. Here, reinforcement learning comes in very important. You know, reinforcement learning is about learning from experience. So based on metrics like duration of a test, test execution success, test failure history, you can create a model where you dynamically give relative importance to the test cases. Based on that, you can relatively order the test cases and say that these should be of higher priority, others should be of lower priority. So there's a lot of work going on how we can use reinforcement learning based test prioritization. Then test refinement and self-healing. This again a slightly more generalized application of the notion of self-improving or self-learning. So the most important application is the concept of self-correcting and self-diagnosing test suites, where they learn from faulty executions, run ML on them, then understand the pattern of fault, then revise their model, and it helps you in creating a self-aware test suite. And so what it helps us in doing is it helps us in automation of a automation script collection or test harness. So we can also think about applying this in optimizing your regression test effort by creating an ML-based automated regression test selection, where only part of your test suite needs to be retested for regression rather than the entire suite. This is very good in the entire CI/CD pipeline as a potential useful tool. Then very important category of testing, which is very important from a non-functional perspective, is security. Here today, in the earlier case, we were talking about, in the earlier days, we were talking about generating manual patterns of malware and then feeding them to intrusion detection systems for detecting malware or preventive malware from intrusion, for preventing from intrusions, etc. But today, all of them have gone to AI/ML. What we do is, based on past data of malware that has been attacked, we generate patterns and extract models which are from machine learning and use them for actual analysis of the patterns to understand the intrusion patterns and detect them before they actually come and hit you on day zero. Similarly, we can talk about fuzz testing based on machine learning to find vulnerabilities in ML by ML-based generated variations, ML-based generated mutations. So this is a very interesting area where we try to find corner cases by ML-based mutations. Similarly, from a end-to-end diagnostics of security, if you have the knowledge which you've collected from your past of different faults, different attacks, you can create an end-to-end, ML-based knowledge system which can be guided as a chatbot for you, which can take answers from questions from you, diagnose, come back to you. So we can talk about an AI-based expert system or chatbot which can help you in understanding security risk. Then this is something which is useful from project management perspective or test manager's perspective. We can talk about test effort estimation as a regression where your output is an effort which can be based on inputs like complexity of test case, tester levels, volume of test cases, etc. And here what becomes important is what are those input factors or input variables which you need to fall into estimation of your test effort. So that was more like, a possibility set, but is it real? I think it's getting real. Lots of tools are coming up nowadays. These are some of the examples which are very popular now in the domain of ML AI based test effort improvement or test efficiency improvement via automation, via better quality, via removal of dependency on experts, improving tester efficiency. There are different business dimensions where this can be done. For example, test.ai is a very good thing. What it does is it has looked at thousands of typical Android errors which people have been doing, and it has figured out creating an automated pattern extraction from there into understanding what are the typical Android errors. Same way, TestTeam gives you a very good idea of identifying GUI rendering errors by just looking at the GUI and not doing simple pixel comparison. So that's all I had, and I'm happy to take questions. I'll be very glad to answer a couple of questions.
Thanks a lot, Doctor, for that insightful talk. We have multiple questions post your session, but then I'm not sure if we'll be able to take all of them. Maybe some of the people, they can connect with Doctor offline via mail or Twitter, and maybe connect with him there and ask the questions. But then maybe if you'd like to take one or two questions.
Yeah, let's take one or two questions.
Okay. So can you see the questions, or do you want me to read a question out?
No, I'm seeing there's no new questions is coming in live event Q&A. I don't see any questions.
In published, if you can see.
In published. Oh.
Yeah, there are a lot. So, yeah.
So when applying defect prediction for real project data, what algorithms? See, one thing I would like give you a very important feedback is don't be in the fancy for doing complex neural networks and all. Try applying simpler algorithms like logistic regression and decision trees, because they give us a handle into what is the actual causality between the estimated output and the input features. Because other conditions like SVM and neural networks, they go into a black box mode, which is not a very good insight for especially people who want to get insights from the effort. Then there is one more question. Would it be right to generate test data techniques using SMOTE? Very much, because today, especially if you look at scenarios, I'll give you an example. If you want to look at example for, let us say, testing the scenario of driverless cars, we cannot always generate the entire real life range of scenarios which the car will face. So you have to get into scenarios which can use, relatively rarer scenarios which can be created and prioritized on par with, say, less prior questions, etc. So it's not like they're not there, but you need to also understand that we need to really be careful about what are the kind of questions you're asking when you're applying ML. So asking the right question and then asking the right data towards that problem is also very important. Any open source projects related to testing? So today, unfortunately, most of the open source projects you will see are on applying this for open source repositories. Like, for example, there's a whole version history of Linux which is available, or there's a whole version history of Ant Java project available. They are creating a very good, what we call as, test bed for understanding patterns from version history analysis or code versioning and code quality improvement metrics, etc. In terms of open source projects, I would like you to look at one of the projects recently open sourced by a famous STEPin member called Rahul. He has delivered a Python-based framework on top of Selenium, which has some elements of intelligence. You should be able to look at that project if you look at his homepage.